So here we are. It's time to talk about the division that always seems to get the most media attention, and that is the NFC East. And I think you've got a pretty wide gamut here of draft performances. So let's dive in, shall we? I'm going to start with the New York Giants. And, to me, pick three, they were kind of in a spot. I totally get and understand why they went with an Abdul Carter. I get it. It feels like he's really duplicative or triplicative, if you will, whatever the hell word you want to put on it. So you already have Brian Burns, you've invested a ton in. You've got Kayvon Thibodeau, first round pick a couple years ago, and now you're adding Abdul Carter. How do you make all of this work? I think it's a fair question. But then you also say you feel like Abdul Carter was that level of type of special talent, like a defensive franchise building block, then you got to take him and you figure out the rest later, and that is also very appropriate. But then I could say should you take in a right tackle here since Evan Neal's been such an epic fucking flop? Maybe. So, but at the same point in time, it's like it would feel really hypocritical to say, oh, you should try to take best player available whenever possible, and then when they take arguably best player available at pick three, you knock them for it. What I'll knock the Giants more for is with a coach and a GM on the hot seat, they traded up back into round one to get a Jackson Dart. Now, it didn't cost him like a 2026 first round pick or anything then, so it wasn't particularly onerous from like a cost standpoint, but it's just a thing of in a weaker quarterback class, it feels like you made a move up for a guy that even when you look at his upside, what do you think it really is? Is it Trubisky? Is it Dalton? What's the real upside here? And is it really a good idea to make a move like this for a team that's already signed Russell Wilson, already signed Jameis Winston, that's going to be in kind of a desperate win now type of scenario, frankly, you're going to hear the dopes that are going to say, well, it'd be great for Jackson Dart to sit and learn. No, you fucking took him in the first round. Your team stinks, and your quarterbacks now are Russell Wilson and Jameis Winston. And Jackson Dart should be playing right away because you got to find out what the fuck he's got. I just wasn't a huge fan of that move. I think by far their best pick, in my opinion, it would be easy to say Abdul Carter, but when you consider everything, I love the Cam Scadaboo pick for them in round four. As much as I hate the thought of him going before the Bears at had their pick at 109, I thought that was a great pick for them. And then getting Marcus Embo from Purdue, got him in round five, athletic guard, and so I think he plays at the NFL level as guard. But if he's in the right system, he feels like he could be a future starter. But it's about what's the maximum value you're going to get out of Abdul Carter the first year or two, especially if you have both Burns and Thibodeau there. What's the real upside for Jackson Dart? Was Darius Alexander really the best player on the board at pick 65? I thought this was kind of like an average overall draft performance for the Giants, so I gave him a C. And then we go to the Dallas Cowboys. And I think everybody was looking at this team and assuming that running back was going to be an early priority for them, as was wide receiver. And we found out that really wasn't the case, right? But, as much as we talk about need, they have other needs. And or you try to play the board and you just let it go where it goes. And as important as need is to fill, and there certainly is an element of that, right? You can sit there and say a primary need filled by a lesser player is far worse than filling a secondary need with a vastly superior player, right? And I think that's what the Cowboys could use as their justification for taking Tyler Booker at 12. I mean, he's a guy that's destined to play guard, but at the same point in time, if you think he's going to be a top 5 in the league guard for 10 or 12 years, make multiple Pro Bowls, and you had success with Zach Martin being, what should be, but he probably won't be a future first ballot Hall of Famer. He'll get in, I don't know if he'll be first ballot. Now you replace him with Tyler Booker. When they invested a mid-first rounder in a guard back in 2014, it worked out splendidly in Zach Martin. I would expect it to do the same here with Tyler Booker in 2025. He just feels like a guy that you plug and play from day one, and you learn to love it for the next 10 to 12 years. But then you look at the other value the Cowboys got in round two as Araku, the edge rusher from Boston College. I just start to think about him and Micah Parsons opposite each other, or maybe even unleashed on the same side, and what that could cause for opposing offenses. You got Shavon Ravel Jr., if he didn't get injured, there's no way he's here on the board at pick 76, but let alone he was. You're talking about a guy that's got outside corner ability. He's got real starter upside. He was a legit first round type of talent and prospect, and you got him at 76. So as much as some Cowboys fans and other media might look at him and say, how could you not address wide running back earlier? How could you not address wide receiver earlier? I'm looking at a 10 plus year, perhaps multiple time Pro Bowl guard that they took in round one, an edge rusher with speed, and they took a corner that had a talent that was 2 rounds above where he was actually taken. Like, it's really hard to knock that. And in this deeper running back class, they invested a couple of picks on running back. Now, Jaden Blue, like, how much is he really going to contribute? We'll see. But he's certainly going to get an opportunity, right? So I thought this was like a C or C plus class for the Cowboys. I'd say more of like a C plus, because they needed a wide receiver, and at least in the draft, they didn't get it, and they probably should have tried to find a way to address running back earlier because it was a real need. But then I come back and say, like, it was solid performance in terms of some of the guys they took, even though you could argue Booker was a bit of a reach by maybe 8 to 10 picks in round one. I don't disagree with that, but in this type of draft, it probably doesn't matter as much in terms of the real draft value because there's probably a lot of variance between teams, which they even talked about during draft weekend. And then I go to the Philadelphia Eagles. And it's just another example to me of how this is a team that seems to have guys just kind of fall into their territory that really shouldn't. For them to be able to get Jihad Campbell at 31 is insane. You only have to bump up one spot so you make sure the Chiefs doesn't take them ahead of you or that somebody doesn't trade up to take them ahead of you. But yeah, like to get that type of guy at 31 and not have to feel the pressure to immediately play him, like let him earn his spot, right, is huge. And then being able at the end of round two, where safety is a big need for you, you just let the board fall to you and you get a guy like Andrew Makuba from Texas. I almost said Clemson. Well, he was at Clemson. He came from Texas. And I look at that and I see these are two guys that have star potential on that defense. And these are your defending Super Bowl champions. Like, how do they keep managing to fucking pull this off? And then in round 5, they get a guy like Smael London Jr., the linebacker from Georgia, who I would argue, like, has some starter upside. Like, I think it's wild to me that the Bears, 20-plus picks before, took a guy that I don't think really can play linebacker at the NFL level in Ruben Hippolyte II, and here are the Eagles at 161 taking London. It almost speaks to why one team is contending and is the defending Super Bowl champions, and the other team, for generations, has played Bears football! So while I don't look at this class for the Eagles and say, wow, I'm overwhelmed, but I look at then at late in round 6 and they get fucking Cameron Williams, the right tackle from Texas. Like, how does he end up at round 6? I thought he was like a 3rd to 4th round talent. For them to get him there, like another guy you draft and you try to develop him, maybe even hide him on the practice squad and maybe he takes over for Lane Johnson at some point, but maybe he doesn't. But the athletic upside and the play potential is far exceeds his draft position. So I think for the Eagles, I give them a grade of like B- because of the quality of their first 2 picks and, some of the value they got later on in the draft. Just fantastic stuff. But the team I think out of this division that did the best when it comes to the draft, when you look at it from a totality, is the Washington Commanders. And it's amazing, right, how one draft can change everything. Last year it was Jaden Daniels at number 2. It changed the trajectory of this organization like that. And now they come into this draft and like, what do? They went to work. They traded a couple of picks this year, next year, in order to get a Laramie Tunsil, so you solidified left tackle. Then you go trade a 5th round pick for Deebo Samuel. How many 5th rounders in this draft are likely to be as productive and as good as a Deebo Samuel? I rest my case. And then you come at the tail end of round 1 and you get a tackle like Josh Connerly Jr. and you could say, I'm going to plug him in on the right side. And now I've got great bookend tackles to protect our franchise quarterback, Jaden Daniels. It's outstanding stuff. They addressed a need by taking Trey Amos in round 2, the corner from Ole Miss. And even as I look at round 4, getting a guy like Jalen Lane from Virginia Tech brings them a bit of a dynamic element to their passing game. Like, when you look at the totality, while they didn't have a ton of picks, you trade for Deebo Samuel, you trade for Laramie Tunsil, 2 massive upgrades there, right? Then you draft Josh Connerly, who I thought was like a top 15 to 18 player in this draft. You get him at 29. Like, that's wild to me. And you get Amos is going to be a year 1 starter at corner. Lane has an opportunity to contribute at some point. Like, this is really good work. When you're picking at the bottom of the draft, it can be really hard to improve your team too much incrementally. But I certainly think In the entire draft offseason slash draft cycle, the Commanders found a way to improve themselves, at least on paper. So I gave them a grade of like B plus for this draft because while they didn't have a ton of picks, some of the trades they made like gave them a huge value in return.